Okay, so how does Brunelleschi actually build this thing? Like I had said previously, people still knew how to build domes, but small domes, at a smaller scale, not so high up. The real challenge in Florence at the Florence Cathedral was this was bigger than anything that had been built in 1,000 years since the Roman era, and in the Hagia Sophia in the 500s, and now it's 1400. That's a that's a long time, right? And so and it was very tall. The base of the drum of this dome was going to be at the top of this tall, story nave in the cathedral. And so, how is he going to build this? And like I said, some of the technologies were still there. We talked about last semester, the idea of having to build centering if you're going to build an arch, and a dome is just an arch spun on its central axis 360 degrees. So the technologies of construction are still there. As you build higher and higher, the stones would just slide off if you don't support them. And so you build what this sort of wooden formwork known as the centering that will support until you get to the top, and then you put the keystone in, and that locks it in place, and it becomes self-supporting at that time. And then you can take this centering down. You also have to have some scaffolding for the workers to actually build all of this as well. During the sort of medieval era, when they were building these pointed soaring vaults, they kind of used a little different technology. They would build some scaffolding on the outside typically, and they would have these ropes that were held in by these heavy weights, and that would sort of create resistance to the stone as they placed it, and that would allow them to kind of build up without having the centering. It was sort of like, instead of having it in the middle, you'd have it on the outside, but it was still serving the same purpose, holding that stone in place as you went and built up. So these sorts of things were known in the early 1400s, and known to people like Brunelleschi and the others. But this just would have been a challenge to have to build a massive scaffolding either in the center or in the outside to build this dome. And so Brunelleschi came up with some really novel ideas. The first thing was to create two shells for the dome, rather than a very solid dome like, say, the Pantheon dome was, or even Hagia Sophia. So there would be an inner shell, and I'll show you some examples in some of the slides. There would be an inner shell that would be sort of the dome that you would see inside the cathedral, but then there would be an outer shell that would be thinner and would be more of the sort of water shedding elements of it. And there would actually be walkways in between. This would help during the construction, and it would help with the maintenance and access as well. And now it's a great tourist attraction. There would be a series of stone ribs, and in this cutaway you can see these stone ribs, and this would help to hold everything together. Much the way the Gothic builders had used ribbed vaulting, with the concept of, it's a lot easier to build a thin arch, get that stable and in place, and then you fill in the space in between off of those solid arches. He could do the same thing with this dome. He would basically build more like a ribbed dome, and then fill it in between. Unlike the Gothic builders, he was not going to express the ribs. Everything would be sort of smooth on the inside. He also was going to build in these stone and iron chains that would go around the perimeter, and these would create tension rings. If you take a circle as something that, basically a ring of chains or whatever, and you load it, and it provides a certain bit of structure. It would allow or prevent really the outward thrusting loads to push out. And that was something that he figured out how to resist that outward thrust that a dome or an arch would have. And another thing, and this was really tricky, and this was the thing that Ghiberti couldn't comprehend at all. It took quite a mechanical engineering mind to do this, and that was to create a herringbone pattern of brick. And this herringbone pattern interlock as you built it, and would actually become pretty self-supporting even as the arches and the dome element became more and more horizontal and didn't have the centering to support it, it was the herringbone interlocking of the bricks that actually would help provide some structural stability. And in this next slide here, you can actually see inside the dome, in that cavity between the two domes, you can actually see still the herringbone brick pattern within that. There's a lot of engineering in here that I'm not going to go into. If we were doing a whole semester course on just the Renaissance, we could get into more detail. But these were pretty amazing innovations. So here's another cutaway detail of the dome itself. And so, we're seeing in orange, this is the outer shell with the sort of roof tiles on it. That'll be the watershed tile. And then we see the stone ribs on the inside. And again, this would be like creating the ribbed vaults of a Gothic cathedral. And then up here on the lantern is a crane system that he developed, and I think I have a better slide coming up. So, the other challenge he was able to solve was a big one, which is, all right, you can figure out how to build the thing, but how do you get supplies, very heavy pieces of stone, buckets of brick and of mortar, not to mention manpower and so forth. How do you get them vertically all the way to the top here? You can't just carry up heavy stones on your back. You might get some strong guys to carry up bags of mortar and sand and so forth, but stones and bricks and stuff like that, you just can't carry that all the way to the top. So you have to lift it up, and he actually created some ingenious mechanical systems for that. This is a series of drawings showing a little bit of how he did this as well. So if you look at the bottom, you see there's a vertical drum that serves as the base for this. That's easy to build. It's vertical. It's just vertical loads being carried down. And then you can see he would build layer by layer. Let's actually go up to the top one. Here's the drum at the bottom. So the first layer isn't too bad. It's still relatively vertical, and the sort of tendency of stones or whatever to slide off is fairly minimal. And once you create a full ring of that ring actually becomes like a tension ring and a compression ring, and it really locks itself into place. All of the stones on this top level here, or bricks, are now locked into place because they're serving almost as a horizontal arch, right, or a horizontal dome, because the forces are now are in compression all around this circle. And so he really is building this in layers. And then after he gets that and it's locked in place, he builds another layer of a full circle all the way around, and that locks itself into place. And so on and so forth till it gets to the very top, and then he can put the sort of top compression ring in with the lantern that sits on top of that. And that was another trick that he had devised, the idea of building this in layers and not just trying to build it, starting from one side to the other. This slide just shows you a little bit of like the scaffolding. They still needed a bunch of scaffolding. He didn't have to build this with centering. And that was one of the things that just sort of blew the minds of everyone who knew anything about construction at the time. They're like, you're going to build a dome without centering? And this was why the committee at first wasn't fully trusting of him, because everyone they talked to said it's impossible. There's no way to build an arch or a dome without some sort of scaffolding or centering. And he said, no, I can do it. I'll need some scaffolding for the workers, but that was pretty easy to build. And this kind of shows you a representation, a section cut through the arch here of the dome of how some of that would be built. It's supported on the drum at the very bottom, and then anchored in here and there through holes that could then later be patched, and you could use the shell, the void of between shells, to help patch in some of that. And here's the bit of the herringbone pattern up here in the upper left of how he connected the bricks together and helped lock them in as he built that. So some of the mechanical inventions, were really innovative. And Leonardo da Vinci, the famous Renaissance man who was a bit of an architect, but also an inventor, very mechanical minded in his own right, he actually sketched up some things that are based on the concepts of the systems that Brunelleschi used at Il Duomo. And on the left, so on the right are some of the drawings that Leonardo that still exist. You can see some of these in museums, actually. On the left is a drawing. I don't think this is Brunelleschi's drawing, but some, based on the contraption that Brunelleschi had developed at Florence. And what it does is it's a center axis here that is got a turn cork, almost like a corkscrew type thing. And this is showing a horse that they probably were using oxens because they're stronger. And you would, you'd harness, and it would go in a big circle around and around and around, and that would turn this crank, and it would turn these gears, which would lock into this vertical gear here, which would then turn this shaft here, and that would turn a series of pulleys. And they understood pulleys and the fact that if you create a pulley system, you can lift very heavy weights, with less force. And so this whole contraption, then here's the bucket. You could put a stone or mortar or brick into that, and you would lift it up. Here it is showing going up high with the stuff in it, and you could lift that very, very high up into the air to get that material up there. What was difficult with this, and again, this wasn't completely new from Brunelleschi, but what he had created was a system is, okay, you can haul the material up, but then how do you get the bucket back down? Because this gear system only works by going one direction. You could lift up the stone, but then you have to bring stuff back down, or at least you have to get the bucket back down, right? And so you would have to, in the old days, before Brunelleschi, you would have to unharness the bull or the oxen, turn it around, reharness it, and then have it go a circle in the opposite direction. And that would turn the crank in the other direction, and the thing would lower down. Then when you got it down to the ground, you'd have to unharness, turn them around, reharness, all that. All that took time. And, anyone who's been around construction knows that time is money. And, contractors want to go, go, go. The client wants things to get done quickly. Time is money, all of that. And so what Brunelleschi created was a system in which you would not have to unharness the oxen. You would, sort of do almost like a gear shift in a car, and it would drop this shaft down, and it would engage this set of gears, and it would actually then, when this set of gears was engaged, it would turn this one in the opposite direction. And you could then, keep the oxen going around and around the same direction, and this bucket would then drop down, and once get to the bottom, you stop the oxen, you'd fill up the bucket, you'd shift the gear, so to speak, this shaft here, re-engage the bottom set of gears, and start the ox again, and he would move same direction, and the bucket would go back up again. It was really innovative. It's it's a mechanical system that today is really obvious to us, but this was a really innovative technology that really helped the construction go quickly and smoothly. The other thing he did, and we can see it in this thing, here's the contraption down at the bottom that is lifting the bucket all the way to the top. Well, then the question was, okay, you can get this bucket of a stone up to the top at your point. Then what do you do with it? The work is going off way over here onto the side. This is 144 feet in diameter at the base. And so those heavy stones and the heavy mortar and all of that, how do you get that off to the side? Well, he created a crane up at the top that, anyone who has seen, construction of high rises, right, downtown in Chicago has seen these cranes. This is Brunelleschi. Brunelleschi creates the modern crane, essentially. He anchors it, into what has already been built here. He's got a counterweight. See the little guy on the left? That's the counterweight. You see that on a modern crane. And here's the bucket with the heavy materials. And he actually had a crank system that you would, spin up there at the top, and this little cantilevered crane would extend outward, with the bucket of stone, and you'd get it out, and then you would, use a system of pulleys to raise or lift the bucket. Uh, like I say, it's you see this very contraption, made out of different materials and a different scale today. You see the very same thing on modern high-rise construction today, and it all starts right here in Florence in the 1400s with Brunelleschi. This cutaway, you can also see some of the chains, the stone and iron chains that he built as well, and the layers. Here are the ribs that he is building, and again, you get the ribs done, and then you can fill in the in between with this herringbone brick and so forth. So all of these things go together to create a very effective construction technology. And in the end, between 1420 and by 1436, he's finished. I mean, it only took 16 years. That sounds like a long time. Certainly, we can build high rises today much faster with the technologies that we have. But this was pretty quick for the construction of such a major dome. Plus, you've got warfare and plagues and things that interrupt construction of the time. So 16 years wasn't too bad to get this done. And here is an aerial view of the finished dome on the old cathedral. So, I was going to say, the dome actually wasn't even designed by Brunelleschi. It was the construction technology, the ability to build this. Here you can see it's an octagonal drum. It's not a full circular drum. You can see a little bit even of the ribs on the outside at each corner point, and then the lantern on the very top. Here's the baptistry over to the left. That, remember, this is a great example of perseverance, right? He loses this competition for the doors to the baptistry. And he sulks. He was very upset at this. He thought he should win. He had a huge ego, no question about that. And he thought he should have been the winner. And some of you even thought maybe his was better. So he goes off to Rome, but he uses the opportunity to discover some of the technologies and think about in his mind what the Romans had done. How did they build these things that he was documenting in Rome while he was off slumming it with Donatello? And that comes back to help him when it comes time for this competition to build the dome. He's prepared, and he has it figured out in his head, and he made it look kind of easy almost. I just want to clarify, the Florence Cathedral is known as Il Duomo, and some people might think, oh, the dome, Il Duomo, Duomo sounds like dome, but that does not mean dome. It actually, Duomo is from the Latin domos, which is house, and so Domus Dei is the house of the Lord or house of God. So a cathedral in Italy was often known as Il Duomo, and every town had their Duomo. Did not mean that it had a dome on it. Florence just happened to get a dome, and it has nothing to relate to the actual dome itself. Here's a nice cutaway section of the completed dome. So, the church completed is this element down here at the bottom. And so the drum and the actual dome is what Brunelleschi finishes. And you can see in this section that it is half as, it is 100% as tall, even more so if you add the lantern on top. The verticality of this, the height of it was immense. And that was part of the challenge of building this. They could get up this high, and then they're like, now what do we do? And Brunelleschi said, oh, I know what to do. So you can also see the void in between the two shells. You can see the lantern. So at the Pantheon in Rome, in the ancient structure, they just had an open oculus. But that lets rain in and everything and the weather. So Brunelleschi puts an oculus on top, or a lantern, excuse me, on top to close that off, but still let light come through. Here are a few views that I took when I was there in 2009. Here's some of this modern scaffolding. And I like this actually because, again, scaffolding was one way he could have tried to do this, build this. Well, look at the scaffolding extent of that just to get to the base of the drum of the dome. Nowadays, we can do that with modern materials and engineering and so forth, but it would have been just beyond the abilities of them at this period to try to build this with scaffolding. And here's a view. This is actually taken at the sort of base of the dome, looking up to the lantern on top here. I think it's kind of a cool view. Here's a night view. There's the campanile or bell tower in the center. The baptistry is right here on the left in the foreground, and then you can see the cathedral with the dome on top. You know, you can get a good sense of how massive this dome is. It towered over everything. It was the biggest thing that had been built for 1,000 years. Here's another cutaway section showing the vaulting in the nave, that's more Gothic. And again, you can see that this is just as tall as the vaulting of the Gothic church, but set on top of that. So I really cannot overstate how major an accomplishment this was. Here's a nice view of the interior with an incredible fresco done by Vasili almost a century later, actually, before they actually got it frescoed. And this is a really great example of Renaissance art. The perspective and the foreshortening and stuff that happens is incredible. Here's a few different views of that. Look at the incredible perspective up here at the top of the little architectural elements. And the foreshortening, and that means is when you're looking up, right, you're seeing things go away from you, and so see how they sort of narrow the columns away, and so as you look up on this rounded dome, it makes it look like it's all very straight. It's a very technical accomplishment artistically as well, to be able to do this. Not unlike what the Greeks did, right, with entasis, to make the columns and the temples they built appear to be straight and counteract the visual sort of trick that your eye would play. All right, so yeah, not painted until 1572, over a century later, after the dome itself was completed. And here's a few views. There's my wife, Melissa. She is modeling the cavity for us between the domes, or the two shells of the dome. So today you can actually walk up if you've got good legs and good knees and all that. You can walk up to the top of the dome. I think you take an elevator to the base of the drum, but from there it's a climb. So here on the left, she's standing basically at the base of the dome. You can start to see it curving just a little bit towards the top. And there's some little windows letting a little bit of light, and of course they put in modern electricity, so you can only imagine without electricity going up here with just this little light and maybe a torch or a lantern. And then here she is climbing up the steps, and of course as you climb higher and higher and the dome starts curving, it becomes a very awkward bit of climb. You can also see in this photo right here is a pier, and you can see some of that herringbone brick that was used. Lots of it has been stuccoed smooth, and so you don't really see the herringbone pattern, but it's there. And then this is a fun view. At some point, you get to the point where you can't be kind of going up on an angle anymore, and so you turn and you go up more like a ship ladder. So you climb up almost vertically this way as you get towards the top. And it's a tight fit. This is all the space that there is between these shells. And, you know, here Melissa is having to bend over quite a bit. The little girl in front of us, looking back, like, who's taking my picture? She fits in there pretty well, but a grown person, you can imagine the challenge of working in this and building this too. You know, grown men who are probably big and bulky, trying to climb this every day and work within this. And you know, you certainly didn't get bathroom breaks to go down to the bottom. You had to take care of business, I guess, up on the top. And then on the right is a little bit of modern graffiti that I thought was so cool. Somebody wrote "Brunelleschi is magic" here, and I think that really fits the theme. And then these are just a few views. Once you get to the top, the view is spectacular. This is looking back off down the nave with the campanile. You can also climb the campanile. That's what I want to do next time. And then you get a view back to the dome, which I think would be pretty cool. So I'll do that next time and show you photos someday. Here's a view of Florence and the Tuscan hills that surround the city. This is the Palazzo Vecchio outside, and the Uffizi Gallery. We'll be talking about Uffizi Gallery a little bit. And of course, Michelangelo's David was initially placed in the Piazza Vecchio right out front here. There's a copy there now. And this is not my photo, but a really cool nighttime or dusk view of the cathedral all lit up. And again, you can really see how tall that dome is from this view. Okay, so Brunelleschi really, because of this accomplishment, which, like I said, was really more an engineering and construction feat than a design. He really didn't do a whole lot of design work on this. It had been previously designed, and everybody wanted a certain dome. But Brunelleschi was the one to figure out how to build it. But he really is known as the father of the Renaissance for this accomplishment, and also for his documentation during his sulking period after the baptistry, during his documentation of the Roman ruins, really kind of rediscovering some of the ancient orders and detailing that would be used by many others throughout the Renaissance. He also this accomplishment unlocked the doors for him as well. A lot of people then started saying, hey, I want you to build me a building or whatever. And so there's a couple of examples that I want to show you briefly in Florence. The first one is known as the Ospedale degli Innocenti. Translated means Foundling Hospital. It's basically an orphanage, what we might call an orphanage today. An unwed mother might give birth here, or if you lost your parents, which happened a lot due to disease and plague and so forth, there were a lot of orphans. They would take care of you. And this was constructed between 1419 and 44. He won the competition in 1418, and so the board of the hospital, probably a lot of the same people that oversaw the Il Duomo construction, they hired Brunelleschi to build this Foundling Hospital, and it's still there. These are my photos. This is a photo taken of the exterior of it, and this is considered by scholars to be kind of the first real Renaissance building. The Il Duomo was, a dome, a Renaissance really inspired dome, but really it was like on a Gothic church. This is the first sort of real ground up Renaissance era building. And he's using a lot of Roman construction here. We see this arcade or loggia of rounded Roman arches placed on authentic, authentically inspired or recreated Corinthian columns, just like he would have seen in Rome itself. And then we have these, belt courses and windows with triangular pediments over them, and that's going to become a hallmark, as you'll see, of Renaissance architecture. This is certainly not high Renaissance. There's still a certain level of, I don't want to say amateurishness to it, but it's very simple design and construction in many ways here. Here's a couple of details. You can see some of the representation of the babies that would be housed here or born here. Here's those Corinthian capitals, though, and again, these are proportionally and detail-wise authentic to Roman construction. Another view of that with the arcade. And I want to compare this. I showed this to you last semester, if you remember, when we talked about Italian Gothic, and I showed you San Miniato al Monte. This was a small church in Florence built in the 11th century, so 400 years before the Renaissance. And I'm going to show this to you a couple of times because this served as an inspiration to the Renaissance architects. This is not a Renaissance building, but you can see some of the same elements. In this case, it's not an open loggia, but you can see this arcade of rounded Roman arches with sort of classical inspired columns on it. And then we see almost like a Roman temple front on the top, the upper part of the nave of the church here. It's broken. We see some classical inspired pilasters here and even an entablature, but then there's this division with another sort of arcade in the marble and then the pediment on top of that. This is not anything like what a Roman, temple would have really looked like, but there's certainly an inspiration to that. And even the window here, where we might normally think we might see a rounded rose window, we see a pedimented window with this triangular pediment on top. This is a bit of a 400 years prior to the Renaissance, Gothic Italian builders saying, hey, what if we kind of built like the old Romans did? But they didn't have the details. They didn't have the proportions and so forth. And that's the difference between the Renaissance and even the Gothic attempts at, sort of being inspired by the ancient Romans. So another great example by Brunelleschi is the Pazzi Chapel in Florence. This is from 1442, finished in 43. This was just a single chapel for a very wealthy family, the Pazzis, one of the 1% of Florence, off of another major church. There's a lot of churches in Florence. I don't even remember which. Oh, Santa Croce is the church, and this is a private chapel. This a wealthy family would pay to build a private chapel where they could worship in private. They didn't have to mix with the masses, and also the church was very happy to get these, patrons to pay for a private chapel because they would use some of that money to help construction and to fill the coffers, so to speak, as well. And this sort of thing had been done way back even in sort of medieval times as well. But this is not a medieval building at all. This is very classical. This is fully Renaissance here. The facade and construction was changed a little bit, both during the period Brunelleschi died, and so it was finished by others and sort of modified over time. But what we see here on the exterior in this courtyard is a much more classical facade. We see perfect Corinthian orders with an entablature on that. And then above that is a flat wall with some engaged pilasters. We see a Roman vault over the entrance, and the entrance door is, got pilasters and a pediment over top of that. There's a dome. The dome element from the exterior is definitely one of the things that got changed from what we think Brunelleschi's design was. This is a recreated drawing of what we think Brunelleschi's actual design was. So here we see the bottom portion of the facade is pretty authentic to what he did and was completed in his era. But then the dome was really more based on the Pantheon dome, a half-round dome that, on a drum that is more inspired by what he would have seen at the Pantheon in Rome. And in plan, we can see the portico that extends out, and we see the dashed lines of the rounded dome over the main chapel space. And then there would have been a little altar. This is the altar space for the family, and the priest could come out and give the family a private mass. Next slide here. There we go. Here's the interior of it. The interior, excuse me, is also probably pretty authentic to Brunelleschi's scheme. And we see, again, engaged pilasters, very classical, an entablature, very Roman. We see on the on the sides and over the altar here on the left, we see fully rounded vaults and arches, very Roman. No more pointed vaults, no more pointed arches. That's Gothic. This is being rejected. That's going to be rejected by the Renaissance. They're going back to the Roman vaulting, the Roman arches, and also a very rounded sort of half-round dome. Not even the dome at the cathedral that he built was more of a pointed dome for various reasons. This is more of the traditional Pantheon style and even Hagia Sophia half dome. With the this really is almost like Hagia Sophia. It's got the little windows here at the base, and then it's got the oculus up on top there. Here's a view straight on of the altar. You can see even above the altar now is going to be a small dome, something much more manageable. Even the main dome over here is much more manageable than that of the cathedral, but very, very Roman, very classical, what we would have seen 1,000 years ago during the Roman era. And finally, off to one side of the chapel space, again, very, very Roman, very classical. We see some coffers in here with the rosettes that we would have seen at the Pantheon Dome or at some of the um, basilicas that were built. Okay, so that ends our discussion of Brunelleschi and the origins of the Renaissance in Florence.